Hi everyone, welcome to this video where we will talk about how to manage the security on AWS using AWS WAF and Shield. So today's video agenda will look like this. We'll first talk about what is the DOS and the DDoS attacks, and then we will talk about what is AWS WAF and how does it work, and then we will talk about what is AWS Shield and how does it work, and we will have a demo of this, like how we can set it up and get started with the WAF on the AWS console and a little bit of Shield resources. And then we will talk about what is the difference between AWS Shield, AWS WAF and the AWS Firewall Manager. So before we go ahead with the first topic, let me give a quick introduction about myself. I'm Aishwarya Sood, working as a lead coach in the AWS domain at Itness, and I am an Amazon authorized instructor, 4x AWS certified, and an AWS Academy accredited educator. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, here is my profile name. You can also scan this QR code to directly view the profile and connect with me. So that's a little bit about me, and let's go ahead with the first video for today. So today we are going to talk about taking care of security on AWS, as I told you. As we know that as per the shared responsibility model of AWS, we, being the customers, are responsible for certain aspects of security. Keeping in mind this thing, we will be discussing about web application attack today and 2 AWS services that can prevent it. So let's begin by understanding what is a web application attack itself. Basically, when the criminals exploit the vulnerabilities in the coding of your application to gain the access to a server or maybe to a database, such types of cyber threats are known as application layer attacks, about which we will be talking today. So there are various sorts of application attacks that can happen and lead towards the disruption of service to the genuine users. So these attacks may include cross-site scripting, which is also in the short form known as XSS, SQL injection, then local file inclusion, and then the distributed denial of service attack. So two types of application attacks that we will discuss about today and will learn how to mitigate them are denial of service and distributed denial of service attacks. And let's understand what are DOS and DDoS attacks one by one. So basically, let's say we have a simple example of a coffee shop in your city. What will happen is, in your coffee shop there will be a phone which will be placed, like people will be calling on that phone to place the order in that coffee shop or a cafe. So basically what a hacker or a prankster of your city will do, he will make fake calls to that phone number of the cafe so that the genuine customers are not able to get the service. Because what they will see, they will always hear that the number is busy, you can't dial this number and so on. Means the service is denied for the genuine customers. Similarly, let's say we are talking about the target here, which is our web server or anything, and there's a hacker. What is the hacker gonna do? He is gonna send fake requests to this server so that the server gets overloaded and the genuine customers and the genuine users service is denied. So what is distributed denial of service attack? Basically, let's say taking back to the coffee shop example again, or the cafe example again, what will happen is, now the same prankster, what he will do, he will ask his friends also to do the same thing. Initially, he was alone doing the thing, that he was making the calls to the coffee shop phone to what you can say, disturb the customer service who genuinely wanted to place an order. Now he is asking his friends also to do the same thing. In this case, the requests are coming from different phone numbers and it is impossible for the coffee shop to block all of them. Like this has made even difficult for the customers to reach out to the coffee shop phone, because there are multiple sources which are being used to make that particular phone busy. So similarly, in distributed denial of service attack, what's gonna happen is a hacker will be using multiple sources to overload the web server so that it becomes even difficult to get through it, so that it becomes even difficult for the genuine users to get the service out of it, because it will be so overloaded and the request will be coming from various IP addresses. So this thing, when multiple sources are used to overload a server, then it will be known as distributed denial of service attack. And when there was one source being used, that was a denial of service attack. So let's understand that how we can mitigate such attacks. We will start by understanding the AWS WAF, which stand for Web Application Firewall, that lets you monitor the network requests that are coming into your web applications. So it can work together with the CloudFront and also with the application load balancer. It works in a similar way to the network access control list, which we use at the subnet level to block or allow some traffic. However, it does this by using a web access control list to protect your AWS resources. We will talk about what is a web ACL a little later. So that's the working is quite similar to NACL, but just a few changes will be there. So how you can use AWS WAF, let's have a look at the example. Suppose that your application has been receiving various malicious network requests from several IP addresses. So what do you want to do? You want to prevent these requests from continuing to access your application, but you also want to ensure that the legitimate users can still access it. So you can configure a web ACL in the AWS WAF so that you allow all the requests except the ones from the IP addresses that you have specified, from which the malicious requests were coming. So when a request comes into the AWS WAF, it checks against the list of rules that you have defined in the web ACL. If a request did not come from one of the blocked IP addresses, it will be allowed into the application. But if a request is coming from one of the IP addresses which is defined in the rule and you said to block them, then it will be denied the access to enter into the application. So overall, because the working is quite similar to NACL, why do we even use it? Basically, it is just an added security in your architecture to protect from the false requests. So let's have a look at a sample architecture where we are using AWS WAF. So this is how it is protecting our overall application architecture. The Route 53 is sitting here to receive all the user requests and perform the DNS resolution. And once the requests are trying to go into the backend, here we have placed a WAF firewall, and what it will do, it will check if the request from where the if a IP address from where the request is coming, is it allowed in the web ACL or is it not allowed. If it is allowed, only then it will be passed on to the backend of the infrastructure, which starts at the CloudFront and so on. But if it is not allowed, then it will be blocked at this level only. So that the DDoS attacks can be prevented by using the WAF. So we will have a quick look by going to the AWS console and see how does it work and what are all the components that we set in the WAF. Let's go there and see how does it work. So we'll just have to go to WAF and Shield. You can just search for WAF and you will reach on to this particular console. There you can access all the security services that we are going to discuss today, that is AWS WAF, Shield and Firewall Manager. So as of now, we are just talking about AWS WAF. So let's look at what all components are there in the AWS WAF that make it work. So first of all, we have the web ACL. Let's go ahead and see what is it. So we will use a web access control list, or what do we call web ACL, to protect a set of AWS resources, and we create a web ACL. We define its protection strategy by adding something known as rules. So rules, if we are specifying individually, that's also okay, but we can create a collection of rules which will be known as a rule group. Rules basically define the criteria for inspecting a web request, and they specify the action to take on the request that match the criteria which we have specified in the rule. For example, if I say click on create rule group, I will just have to give a name. I will say the demo rule group. Okay, so after that, okay, I can add a hyphen here. Let me add it. I can give a description, and the CloudWatch metric name will be fetched with the same name what I'm giving to my rule group, and then I can choose the region in which I want to create this rule group and then click on next. Here I can add the rules. what rules I want to add. There are various statements that I can specify. Okay, if a request matches the statement, or if a request matches all the statements, and okay, and something else. Like with this operations also, if you want to specify multiple statements also, you can add like this. Okay, if both of these statements match, then what should happen? Then action you can specify whether it should be allowed or it should be blocked. Okay, you can also configure the rules to block the matching request allow. That's what I told. But you can also make them configure to count the request or run the bot control action against them that will use the captcha puzzles or the silent client browser challenges that can be used. So up to you, depending on your requirement, or even you can add a custom response here which you want to add if a request is blocked. Okay, so what should be the response that is given? All these things you can specify here, but all starts with giving a name to the rule and specifying what statement you want to add, and then what action should be taken. Once you say add rule, one rule will be added into your rule group. Similar way, you can add more rules as well. Okay, so that group of rules will be known as rule group, and for this rules you can even set the priority that this rule should be on the first number or second number or whatever it is. So they will be matched in their priority with the lower number first, and then the second number, and then the third number, and so on. So whatever come first will be taken into consideration first. So we will go back to AWS WAF and we'll go ahead and create a web ACL. So when we work around these resources, before creating a web ACL, I want to tell you about one more thing that comes up here, that is IP sets. So in IP sets, what do we create? We just have to say create IP set, just give a name of the IP set. I will say my IP set. Okay, so let's give a hyphen in them, and you can give a description also for what you are creating, then the region where are you creating, and the IP addresses. So what is this basically? It will be a collection of the IP addresses based on which you will be allowing or denying some particular request. So rules was one thing. If you want to allow or deny the request based on some specific statements. Otherwise you can also specify this IP set also, where you want to allow or deny a specific set of IP addresses. So let's add a IP range here. We'll say 10.0.0.0/16 is what we want to add in the IP set. So this is a whole range I'm specifying. You can give 32/32 if you want to allow or block this particular IP address itself. Otherwise you can specify a range or whatever as your requirement in this column. And then you say create IP set. So this will be referenced when we create our web ACL. Let's go ahead and create a web ACL now. First of all, let's give it a name. This is a demo web ACL. Okay, some name like this I'm giving here. Description can be added depending on what you want, and then the CloudWatch metric name, as usual, it will be fetched automatically here. Now you tell that whom you want to attach it to. This web ACL you are creating, like if you remember in this architecture, we were associating it with the CloudFront distribution. So similarly, it is asking here that where do we want to attach it? Do we want to attach it on the CloudFront distribution? Then it will be global. Otherwise, we can attach it on the regional resources also, which can be application load balancer or the API gateway. Okay, basically whatever will be the front door for our backend application. So in which region your load balancer is existing, you can specify. Okay, where are you creating this web ACL, so that you can use it to associate it with the resource that is there in that region. Here you can see if you want to add a particular resource right now and associate with your web ACL. Otherwise you can do this process even later as well. Then click on next. Now comes the rules. You have to say add rules. Now you can say add managed rule groups if you want to use this predefined rules. Okay, there are many rules that are maintained for you and by the AWS marketplace sellers as well. They are available here. You can just check it out. If something matches your requirement, you can use something from here. Otherwise, I will say cancel, and I will just use my own rules and the rule groups. Here they are asking you, do you want to build a rule? Then you can specify it here, like the same thing which we were seeing when we went on to the rule groups console, correct? So do you have a rule group that is already existing? You can choose from here. Otherwise, what we created was an IP set. So I will just choose this option and will give it a name. This is a demo and IP set, which one I created, my IP set. So here you will specify the action that should be taken on this IP set. Do you want to allow, do you want to block, or do you want to take any other action? I will say the requests that are coming from this particular IP range should be blocked. Okay, I will just add the rule in this. Now one rule is added here. Okay, you can see this rule is added here. You can add more rules and set their priority. Here is just one rule. Now next you have to specify a default web ACL action. If a request is coming, which is quite common scenario, that if a request is coming but it is not matching any of the rules that you have given, then what you should do? You can specify if it should be allowed or it should be blocked. I will say block if a request is coming that doesn't match any of my rules, I want to block it. Then click on next. Okay, so you have only one rule here, so there is nothing like priority. If we have multiple rules, we can drag and we can drag up and down to set the priority of the rules. Okay, so they will be prioritized in the order they appear, as I told you previously. So for whatever is on the first, they will be taken into consideration, and then the second, then third, and so on. Then next you will specify the CloudWatch metrics here if you want to give anything. So here if you see, we have a option of request sampling. If you disable the request sampling, this means you can't view the requests that match your WebSQL rules. But if you want that, it is recommended that you keep it enabled. By default also it is enabled, but if you still don't bother about this thing, then you can just disable the sampled request. So I will keep it enabled and will hit next. Here I can just review all the settings that I have chosen previously, all the configurations, and then I will click on create web ACL. So it will be created. You can see my demo web ACL has been created. Now where this can be used, I can attach it with my load balancer, or I can attach it with any of the resource that serves my backend infrastructure. So how do you do that? Just open this demo web ACL or whatever will be your web ACL, and you will see a section here, associated AWS resources. If you remember, as of now I have not associated any resources, but you can associate here. You can specify whatever resource you want to add here, and just find and associate here. Here you can check out your rules which you have given, and you can add the rules as well through the same process like how we were using previously, and any other configurations also. Like, we will not dive deep into other configurations as of now, because this I was just telling to getting started, that how you can get started with this web ACL, but you can explore it even more as per your requirements and the use cases. So this is a good tool. Your architecture will be highly secure, because this is adding a little more security than the usual firewalls, like you have security groups and NACLs. This will be the even upper level of firewall that you are adding here. So let's go back to our slides and continue with the further topic. So the next service that we are going to learn is AWS Shield. It is a managed threat protection service that protects the perimeter of your application. The perimeter, what is exactly that? It is nothing but the first point of entry for the application traffic coming from outside the AWS network. It protects your application against the DDoS attacks. Also has two levels of protection, which is Shield Standard and Shield Advanced. So how does they work and how do they differentiate from each other? Let me tell you about a few points. So the one that you see here, the Shield Standard, it automatically protects all the AWS customers at no additional cost. It protects your AWS resources from the most common, frequently occurring types of DDoS attacks, and as the network traffic comes into your applications, the Shield Standard will use a variety of analysis techniques to detect the malicious traffic in real time and automatically mitigate that. But if you are not satisfied and if you want a even stronger security and even advanced features for the security of your architecture, then you have the Shield Advanced, which is a paid service. So it is quite costly, but still the reason is that because it is giving you really advanced security features, it provides detailed attack diagnostics and the ability to detect and mitigate sophisticated DDoS attacks. It can also be integrated with other services such as Amazon CloudFront, Amazon Route 53, and the Elastic Load Balancing. So basically just remember this point that Shield standard will be available for you by default and you don't have to pay anything for it. But if you want Shield Advanced, then of course there will be a cost associated with it. And then what is this AWS SRT support? That is the feature that you get only if you have subscribed to the Shield Advanced, that is AWS Shield Response Team. So this SRT has a deep experience in protecting AWS, that Amazon.com and its subsidiaries as well. As an AWS Shield Advanced customer, you can contact the SRT team at any time for assistance during a DDoS attack that affects the availability of your application. And you can also work with the SRT to create and manage custom mitigations for your resources. So that feature only will be available here. Otherwise, the default standard will have just the basic features. Additionally, you can integrate AWS Shield with AWS WAF by writing custom rules to mitigate complex DDoS attacks. So it's like various security options are there. First of all, we start with a very basic of security group. Then we have NACLs. But if we want more security, we come to the AWS Web Application Firewall. But if we want even more security, we can consider AWS Shield. So one by one, we are learning that, okay, we have these many levels of security. Now it's up to us that how much strong security we want to build. Let's have a look at a reference architecture where we have built our backend using EC2 instances as a part of an auto-scaling group and having a load balancer attached to them. So we have used a database and then the security groups to protect both our application servers and the database servers. The traffic to these resources is routed through Route 53 and CloudFront is there for caching and for the faster content delivery. So finally, talking about why the WAF and Shield are there, they are there for providing additional security in this architecture. An added layer of security can be provided to our applications by using this web application firewall. So we have seen that how does it work. There are web ACLs, we add various rules into that, which can be the statements or which can be the specific IP ranges which can be allowed or denied. And then we can have the Shield Advanced in place for an even more added layer of security for our network. So Shield Standard will be there, but if you want more security even than the WAF and you want security on the level of Shield Advanced, you can add that. You can see Shield Standard is here in our architecture, but yeah, for more and even stronger security, Shield Advanced will be coming into picture. Let's go to the AWS console and see what all we have for the Shield, and then we will talk about the firewall manager a little bit. So when you go to Shield and go to getting started, you will see the option of subscribing to the Shield Advanced. So let it load. I'll show you there. Yeah, you can see here you are getting the option of subscribing to Shield Advanced, but you can see the pricing is approximately $3,000 per month. So this is only needed for the organizations where they want such a kind of security. Also, you have a list of protected resources once you enable the Shield Advanced and you are protecting some resources. You will get all the things over here. As of now, it is all disabled for me since I have not enabled the Shield Advanced. I'm not a customer of that. Then you have a global threat dashboard as well. If you want to just review that what Shield Advanced is doing and what's all happening, you can see the last 2 weeks of summary has been given here, like what was the largest packet attack and largest bit rate, the most common vector, the threat level, and the total number of attacks that have happened. And you can see this map as well here, the frequency of the attack map as per the locations. And then events in the last 2 weeks, you can see a bar chart kind of thing here, and then this metrics also you can see over there. So anything you want to access will be available here. You can also filter that what do you want, like the duration, if you want for last day or the last 2 weeks, anything, you will find it here itself. Okay, so if you have enabled Shield Advanced, you will be able to work with it. But yeah, I just gave you the idea that how you can get started with this. Anyway, Shield Advanced, we all will have Shield Advanced only with the subscription. Why I'm telling this again? Because many people get confused about these two offerings, so that you keep this in mind. Always remember about what is a paid option and what one is the free option that we all have by default. Now we have learned a little bit about the AWS WAF and AWS Shield, but one thing that I was talking but we didn't discuss is the AWS Firewall Manager. So let's see that what are the differences between all these security services. So we can use AWS WAF, AWS Firewall Manager and AWS Shield together to create a comprehensive security solution. It all starts with the AWS WAF. You can automate and then simplify the WAF management using the Firewall Manager. Then Shield Advanced adds additional features on top of AWS WAF, such as dedicated support from the Shield response team, that was called as SRT, and even the advanced reporting. If you want granular control over the protection that is added to your resources, AWS WAF alone is the right choice. But if you want to use AWS WAF across the accounts and accelerate your AWS WAF configuration, or even automate the protection of new resources, then use the Firewall Manager with the AWS WAF. And then finally, if you want high visibility websites, like if you are having that kind of websites or are otherwise prone to the frequent DDoS attacks, then you should consider purchasing the additional features that the Shield Advanced has to offer for you. So basically, for additional protection against DDoS attacks, AWS also provides Shield Standard and Shield Advanced, because WAF can minimize the effect, but Shield Advanced is an added security. So basically, the basic security with the WAF and strong security with WAF plus Shield Advanced, and then finally, if you have these things to be managed across the accounts, like let's say you have configured AWS organizations and you want to configure all these things across the accounts, you want to manage it centrally, then the Firewall Manager will come into picture. So what do we get in the Firewall Manager? You can see for using the Firewall Manager also, my account needs to be a part of the AWS organizations, and then I can get started with it. Okay, basically for managing the security across multiple accounts, this service will come into picture. Okay, then you can get started with this. You can see the per policy pricing for it is $100 per month. You can create the security policies here, and you can define the resource sets here, like all the resources that should be managed through your Firewall Manager. Everything can be accessed from within this particular console, all the three services that we discussed today. So that was getting started about the security services, that is WAF, Firewall Manager and Shield. I hope you have got a good idea about these services. So we'll meet in the next video. Thank you.